Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. We're delighted to welcome Procure EV as the sponsor for this episode. They're a consultancy supporting organisations across the EV charging and electrification sector by bringing clarity and confidence to procurement bids and tenders. I'm joined by Managing Director and Founder Leon Gomez for a really engaging conversation about the role procurement plays in shaping better EV charging experiences, why it's about far more than frameworks and paperwork, and how the right approach can help the sector move forward at pace. This is the kind of conversation that shows how smarter procurement can help the electrification transition move forward with confidence. Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Electric Evolution. I have a wonderful guy with me today, Leon Gomez, who's the Managing Director of Procure EV. Leon, we've known each other a little while now. It's so nice to actually finally be able to record this with you. Welcome.
I know it's been a journey. A journey with kids, as always the case. Illness, wind, broadband, you name it. We got there.
There's been the whole there's been that whole broadband connection up to Scotland, and we probably could have done better having a couple of baked bean tins and a piece of string at one point, didn't we?
We've got electricity now here though, so it's all good.
So because I'm from Yorkshire and that's what we used to have, of course, you know. So let's start off by talking a little bit about your background and what you did before you setting up Procure EV, and let's start where you live in the country as well for a start off.
Yeah, so part of the reason for the crap broadband is because I live in the sticks essentially. So I live west coast of Scotland, lovely area, 40 minutes from Glasgow, surrounded by forest trees and a castle, which is great. But what doesn't help with the big mountains is the signal, essentially. But this is where I'm born and bred from. Apart from the name, dad from South America, mother from Scotland. The background is India and Portugal, would you believe? It's a bit of a mixed bag. So yeah, we're covered in charges in Scotland, so it fits nicely with what I want to achieve.
And so what have you, just give us a little bit of background about what you've been doing, in your working life?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a very strange one. So if I'll rewind right back to school. I don't know how many people do that, but I'll do it for a laugh. So the only thing I really enjoyed has always been cars, but you can't do a subject that's called cars. So the next thing I enjoyed was music. Didn't want to play the piano. My mum really wanted me to, so I played the drums and guitar instead. But the other thing was following my dad's footsteps was languages. Studied languages. Went to uni, did French and Spanish and Italian, and then, as is always the case, you want to be a teacher. Had a go at that, much like Belinda had mentioned in our podcast the other day. She lasted a year. I lasted a few weeks. It was in Paris. I taught kids, and I knew at that point. I did it on and off for until 6 weeks, probably about 6 months. But it wasn't for me. So went into logistics, fell into that, did some retail management for a large retailer, food store, managed a store there. Again, that wasn't for me. So eventually going into logistics was working with a forklift truck company. I enjoyed it. It was almost cars, but not quite. So, but in logistics, I was getting a bit bored because you can only manage so many networks. I was managing a dealer network across French and Spanish-speaking countries and Italian-speaking countries, and it kind of sort of was that you either wanted to manage a team of 10 or 12 people, and I do love people. I just don't really like managing them. So I just wondered if there was a better way. One of my passions is actually saving money, which is a bit boring, but I wondered, is there a career into that? And found out there was procurement. So took a leap of faith, went into a procurement role for a startup company. They went pop. This is a run theme here. After a year, and then thankfully SSE came to the rescue, and I was there for a good 6-7 years, working bizarrely on their metering, retail, and eventually renewables and EV side. And then kind of brings me to where I am today. I mean, there's a passion there. Kind of again, I have to repeat, Belinda, is that cars, since my grandfather was a Fiat salesman many years ago, and brought us into the limelight with his the background of cars and classic cars, rally from my uncle, and I fell in love with cars at a very early age and really had a drive to be, pardon the pun, to be involved in some way, shape or form. SSE being energy, it was kind of cars, but then all of a sudden there was a link to energy and cars with electric cars, which kind of came to my light for me in around about 2012, before SSE actually, when I did a presentation on Tesla. Some whack job from Scotland is doing this presentation on a car company. People were like, who is this guy? Driverless cars, autonomous tech, what an absolute nutter. And then went to SSE and tried to see if there was an opportunity there. Walking in the front doors of SSE, luckily there was a charging, you probably remember My Electric Avenue project. They had a setup there at the front entrance of the Glasgow office where you could charge a car and park in the city centre for free. So I was saving money, saving the planet, and cars were involved with energy. I was like, oh my God. Test drove a Tesla, which we couldn't afford. But I was thinking, this is the future. Probably quite like John had mentioned this podcast the other week, or a couple of years ago, was going from an old car.
John Curtis?
Yeah, going from an old car to this electric. Oh my God, that's just like it's like a spaceship. So we ended up. A dream of mine was always my mum and dad had extended their house. So I always had this thing in my head about how much can I suck from the sun. Basically, solar panels, battery, but all this tech. I was like, like we talked about ADHD, kind of something new, like a squirrel. So for me, it was the solar and the battery, and the cars. Plug it in cheap, save money, and extend the house. So we sold a perfectly good car and bought a 70-mile range EV when we had to do 70, 80 miles a day. Crazy, but it worked. And then brings me today in a roundabout sort of way to why I am where I am today with Procure EV. So yeah, and that's a very long introduction, but that's trying to keep it as short as possible.
Hey, I don't mind very long introductions. That works well for me. All of your background so far, you've had cars, energy, being excited by cars and energy and all of that kind of stuff. But can you just give us a little bit of background to why Procure EV? What started this kind of will and want for you to move into being self-employed? You was working for a big energy provider and doing lots of stuff there. What was it that made you set up your own business?
Probably there's a couple of things I would say. So two things would be, when I was at SSE working with their head of fleet, zero emissions fleet, we got on very well, wanted to really drive the transition, which, as most people know, at a council or a private large corporate is very difficult to do something quickly. So that, with the ADHD, didn't sit right.
Yep.
The second thing was he left, and it just happened to be an opportunity. I remember very clearly speaking with my dad out the front in the driveway about this opportunity with this company I've never heard of, or kind of rumblings, Volta Trucks, to head up the bids and tender division. Now, I'd had about a year's, 13 months experience of bids and tenders before in the forklift truck company. Thought, wait a minute, so I'm almost at cars. As a manufacturer wants to employ me to kind of essentially head up the bids and tender division with someone else from procurement who we got on amazingly well with, and they're giving me more money to do something I want to do. All right then, where do I sign? Knowing it was a startup, that was a big risk. And we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
So the inevitable, unfortunately, after 13 months it did go pop, but that experience was too good to miss. The reason after that was that going through redundancy, again, SSE got a phone call from someone else, funnily enough, that I'd employed as a temp resource contractor at SSE. Great relationship for an opportunity to do contracting. And I thought, this is a different way of working where I can make a meaningful difference in a short time frame to something or someone, help a project, improve things, add value, and then pick something else. It's probably the whole ADH thing. But in that short space of time frame, I can sort of try and shine bright and bring value to someone or something, which really hit the nail. And then just naturally that contract came to an end. But within that time frame, I wanted to add value. I set up a vehicle to grid trial through Innovate UK, through another small to medium company who I always preferred working with because I felt there was a real passion and connection there, helping small to mediums, because they're still small enough that they want to make a difference and small enough that they can react and change and adapt. Again, that really clicked the button for me. And then the contracts came to an end. I thought, as I was trying to push through EV positions in SSE, honestly, they're a fantastic company to work for, highly recommended, but the positions really never, big machine, never came to fruition. And I thought, I've always thought about this, and I've said to so many people in the office, I'm just going to do it. So I closed my eyes and I jumped head first, and I thought, I have to make this work. I have to try. If I don't, I'll never forgive myself. So lo and behold, a few months later, I set up, bizarrely, stupidly, on the 31st of March this year. Can imagine what happened. Procure EV was born, and then I get the tax person asking for a tax return. I said, you can have one if you like. I've earned absolutely nothing. Phone call after phone call, and it was fine. So here I am, and luckily, kind of over the years, we probably know a lot of the same people. Like, one of my good contacts, they'd bizarrely installed my first charger, Pod Point, almost 10 years ago. Kept in touch, we did presentations, kept turning up the same events, kept speaking on Energy Saving Trust voluntary presentations and things, and all of a sudden, there we are sitting in a cafe talking about a potential job together. So, I think it's that important lesson in life, maybe for me, is like we were talking about earlier before, is a couple of things probably people buy from people. Pays to be nice. What goes around does absolutely come around, especially in a nascent small industry where we need a collaborative approach to make a difference. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours sort of approach to things. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere with it. But that's how it was born. And I'm hoping that was short enough. I'm always conscious of time. It's like self-employed. You have to every minute is a prisoner.
But actually, and yes, it was absolutely fine. Thank you. I was going to say, it's not an easy jump, is it? Going from
No.
being employed to then working for yourself. I think there's a lot of people maybe watching, listening, who might not even want to go that route. But what I'll say is, yes, it's flipping hard, but actually, it is so worth it when it works out.
Yeah.
You can't, to say that you've started something from grassroots and from nothing, come up with the ideas, started putting it together, worked out what the products are, started doing the marketing, etc., etc. When it starts working, it's really hard, but it's not an overnight, thing, is it?
No,
But just
no,
so
no,
it can
no.
be so rewarding.
Like you were saying earlier on, the reason behind for me was always, I haven't been in corporates all along, was when the likes of a small to medium missed out, and I knew, especially in a new industry, that they would be the best people probably for the job, but because the sausage machine of procurement or whatever mechanism we have for scoring says no, they don't get the contract. And I've always struggled with that. It's because it's different in a new industry. It needs to be the government, private sector companies, councils, everybody needs to think different about EV and say, well, hang on, these establishments have bought into that, but these small to mediums have built it. They're the ones that are going to make a difference. So that's the ones you need to engage. like we were talking earlier on about innovation from early on, getting involved with the project teams, getting involved in getting their hands dirty because they know how it works. They're inventing how it works. So that's the Procure EV, as I said earlier, raison d'etre is to help those smaller companies in the bid tender process to get into the big stuff, because they should be there. They absolutely have to be. And for those companies that are contracting or buying stuff to appreciate, we need them as much as they need us. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
So let's talk about, you've given a bit of an idea about what you're doing there,
Mhm.
but what does your daily life look like? What is your work? What is your, what are you doing to provide that procurement expertise? What is that procurement expertise? Because not everybody knows, do they? They don't really know. Not everybody knows how procurement works. So you've kind of said a little bit about the nuts and bolts, but what are you doing to support companies then?
So one of the first things I would do to support a small to medium company, essentially most of the time, would be to take it. We have the cost. So the first thing I'll look at is, what's your pain points? That's a very, probably, I apologise, I don't like cliches bizarrely. What are the bits that frustrate you? What's the annoying things? Like every time you make a soup, is there hairs falling in it? Is there a way to do it differently? And we always go back to food. But is there a way to that problem for you that can be fixed, not just this time, but every time? So one of the first things I'll look at is like, okay, big cost items, the 80-20 rule. So 80% of your spend is with 20% of suppliers and all that good stuff. So what are those items? And then look at those, strip them down and say, well, is there a different way? So if all of a sudden you're looking at a cost of X, maybe you can bring that X cost down so you have more money available to invest it somewhere else, or to go into some other innovative area and project, or to market and add, like Belinda does a great work, adding that product marketing element, which then can grow the company, and in turn you grow more sustainably. So it's to try and look at, what are our costs, where can we make a difference and bring those costs down, where the quality and everything matches, because that's very important, and the deliverables don't suffer, and then allow us to grow more sustainably. And so they don't become another startup victim, if that's the case, where they don't have any cash flow. Is to try and maintain the cash flow. And so it's looking at the supply chain first and foremost. I mean, can you, simple things like, why shouldn't a small to medium company be able to fix pricing? Because they can. A quick phone call, yeah, we'll do that. Because you've also got then the new market entrants, again, like a small to medium, looking at those ones, they're absolutely, I wouldn't say desperate, but they're absolutely completely driven and with lots of money behind them to get into UK or European markets. So it makes a lot of sense to invite these people in to get them to prove themselves. And actually, all of a sudden, you find out they're developing something else. So there you've got another differentiator where they want to make a difference. So it's to try and flex that supply chain both ways in terms of cost, quality, deliverables, innovation. Drive innovation where you can. That's one of the first things. And fixed pricing, because it always helps to maintain and see where your project costs are going to go.
So how important is it when you're working with companies to get them all the departments and everybody in there to collaborate with one another? How important is that for you?
Absolutely key. I can give you a good example. So, and I think it's a good point actually, because it's something that's probably missed. So procurement, essentially their role is to buy stuff. It's the kind of boring stuff. So HR look after people and they do a great job, otherwise it wouldn't work. But nobody likes them. Procurement buy stuff until you spend too much money, so therefore nobody likes them. There's lots of departments like that. But also it's really an important role that we, bring everyone together. So a project management team, the first thing I would do, and I know project SSE, wherever I am, is look at who we can get involved, because at the end of the day, if you're going to get something signed off, buy-in, and it's going to work, you must inform all the key stakeholders. Otherwise, you know exactly that, Liz, with your expertise, is that you don't want any roadblocks. So first of all, what's going to be the potential roadblocks? I had a contract I placed years ago, was a utilities contract finally for SSE, and I was told from the offset, there's one person in there that's going to be a problem. Turned out they were the biggest advocate. It's like, there's my challenge. So it's like, get them from the phone call first, find out they were a procurement expert, they just wanted a bit of hands-on involvement. Great, take some of the work off me, good experience, and all of a sudden they were the person pushing or helping to implement the change across other business units as an operational leader. So you must have all those, finance, legal, it depends what size of company is, but essentially, operations have to be in there. Engineers need to be able to, if it's EV stuff, how do they install it? Is it simple to use? Your back office, your IT, is it making sure it's an open source type equipment, if that's what it is? Because otherwise you're going to hit a block straight away. Everyone must be involved, and all of a sudden they feel part of it, and before you know it, the change is through, and everybody's happy, hopefully.
But I was going. We talked about things that can be real challenges, didn't we? Because I was saying that I've worked for big companies before, and you have issues where still where somebody from business development, they'll go in and they'll some, and I'm not saying everybody, please, if you're listening in your business development, please don't take this the wrong way, but some business development people promise the world, but can't necessarily deliver the world, because so do you see that still as a challenge where you've kind of, because your business development, and then you kind of you've got procurement starts getting involved, and you go to procurement and bid stages and things like that, because you're selling something, somebody's buying that product, and no matter who's buying that product, you've got a procurement or a bid team involved in one side and the other side, haven't you? Depend on how it all works. But do you see that as kind of, like you're saying about collaboration, do you still see that as a problem? Because then you've
Yeah,
got the ops team that are delivering. And sometimes it just feels like and from an improvement point of view, from my side, I find that level of communication of what's going on. Actually, by the time it's got to the ops team, or it's gone through projects, or it's like, what was this? What you've tried to sell here isn't what we can deliver, and then that's, again, it's sort of collaboration and communication, isn't it?
100%. I mean, probably the best example would be at Volta Trucks, and I was kind of pretty much with, as I said, ex-colleague Steve and I, heading up the bids and tenders division, was looking at the whole process. So we had a 15-minute sprint meeting. So we're preparing for a tender, for example, and the customer comes in and they say, we want these trucks. So straight away, probably you can't, especially a startup, you probably can't do snow chains. That was one of the examples. For I can divulge now because they're gone. For, let's say, a Scandinavian Royal
Mm,
Mail. So we did get onto the framework, but not without a lot of
mm,
blood, sweat, and tears. And the reason was that because we had product engineering, sorry, and product experts to say, can we do this or not? Right, snow chains aren't designed. Right. Have you looked at these? Yes. So there was a timeline of when it'll be developed. So it's telling the full story of, yeah, that will be developed by March 26. Okay, now we have a story. Is that the case? And verifying it with someone
mm,
else, the product experts. Yeah, but actually, if we go for this alternative, it's a bit quicker. Engineers, is that okay? Yes, it is. And this is meanwhile on a call, and the blockers identifying them at every meeting. Then we had the business development who'd begun with yes, 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 quite often, because they kind of have to get in the room, and I get that. But it's like, let me check on that.
mm,
So it's like sometimes being privy to those conversations to go, well, hang on, 1 minute. I, I appreciate what you're doing here, and I'm now in bids, but from a procurement point of view, a background, you need, like you say, you need to think about, is that actually feasible in that time frame or at all? So most at Volta was feasible, it just hadn't been done yet because it was a bit of a yes project, isn't it, on the whole. We could do it all, but you need to give us time. So then that was product engineering, design, and the business development kept up to speed. And then all of a sudden you're looking at that package of, well, what on earth is that going to cost? Well, you don't have the tooling, you don't have the process, we don't really have the materials yet. So it's a whole exercise about kind of like everything all at once and coordinating that approach through to your bid, and making sure you meet the time frame. So essentially, it's like if you've got a time frame of, let's say for example, the deadline is the 25th of December, everything's due by the 12th, by the way, and you tell everyone that message and you manage expectations with the customer so that you are, still quite often the case is you're running to the wire, but at least you've built in some time and space for you as a bid manager or whatever to be able to tell that story and have everything together by that frame point. So yeah, you have to collaborate and communicate. And I found that the example of the sprint meetings daily or bi-weekly, whatever, helped to push that message through and to make sure everyone was engaged and involved in the message when they go back to those meetings with customers was fluid and also the truth. Otherwise, you're just digging a hole for yourself.
Do you know what? Do you know what? I just want to ask you a question
Mm-hmm.
because depending on the organisation that you work with,
Mm-hmm.
depends on the title that you are. So you've kind of, so for example, in a local authority, you'll have a procurement team,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll also have the procurement team, kind of in a, say for example, we mean you've talked about EV charging before, haven't we? You have a
Yeah.
procurement team there, or you might be the procurement person. But then you've got kind of bids, so you've got the bid team as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where does one stop? Where does one stop and the other one start? And actually, can somebody in procurement also be part of the bid team? Because I've worked in contracts before, so
Yeah.
we'd be writing the contracts. Do you know what I mean? But actually, we were all part of commercial.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where do you see that fine line of where does one start and the next one finish?
Are you talking about within the same organization, for example? Or are you talking about from my
Yeah,
expertise
I
coming?
suppose so. Well, I suppose it from your expertise, but also, just for other people to understand where do they all come in, because
Mm.
like different terminology in different businesses, where do you see them? So what does procurement do in a local authority versus what does a bid team or somebody who's so what are they all different or are they all the same?
That's a good question, and probably the reason my Volta Trucks, my ex-colleague and I, Stephen, were taken across to head up from procurement, utilities, to head up the bids division is because it was that Amazon outlook to say, well, what is the end goal? And working backwards. So if you think about it, I suppose, and this was like the last few years I've kind of learned this. I thought if I can understand the process end to end in this field of buying and selling stuff, then you should, by the virtue of that experience, be able to go, well, this is a good. And thankfully, we've just been successful on another big and a decent tender, because you should be able to say, well, this is a good answer. This is what procurement would want to see, and all those terms and all that sort of stuff. So let's work back the way. How do we build that into a bid? Maybe when you think about it in terms of a council or a company, absolutely the bids and the procurement team, probably in SSE in the enterprise division where they are selling charges out to public hubs and stuff, they do work very closely, interestingly, in there because, and that's just one example, because they are, what they can deliver and what they can do is very much dependent on what can be procured, essentially. And if they are going to
Mm.
put out a bid, and ideally, if you're going to put out a bid, you want someone with a bit procurement knowledge, because otherwise it's just a sales pitch. But if you can do it in procurement, you're right, procurement lingo. Try and avoid as many terms as you can or acronyms, but you can do it in procurement language as a certain way. It makes that a lot easier to manage, a lot easier to be, hopefully be more successful, because you understand how they tick. It's like, here's a list of, this is not a wish list. If you don't do this, you're not going to get on the framework. Right, okay. Make sure that's done. So it's very important that if they're in the same organisation, they absolutely should talk to one another, because I don't think you can have one without the other, really. But they probably don't. How many organisations work alongside or in conjunction with, which makes it difficult, yeah.
And that's where, like I say, on the improvement side, you kind of need people to, because like you said, people buy from people, but they don't just buy from people. They have to believe in people.
Yeah.
So even if you're in the same business, you have to believe and understand what the person either side of you does. So if you're part of a process, and this sounds really boring, doesn't it? You talk about the word
No,
process, but
no.
actually you're talking about people working in departments, and
Yeah.
you've got you're doing one thing, they're doing the one on the left's doing that one, and the one left to that one is doing this thing, but we're all involved, and then the ones on the right are after you. So if you're not talking to each other, you end up just being in a little silo. I'm in my own little lane,
Yeah.
but then that's where things start going a bit awry, isn't it? Because, and especially in big companies, but it's not actually, do you know what? It's not even just in big companies. I've seen it very many places where people are just, especially if there's time pressure, you're so busy, you're so busy concentrating on what you're doing that you don't have time to talk to other people. But actually, sometimes you end up overlapping with what that person either side of you is doing, because actually you're not talking. So if you can work out what that one's doing, that other person's doing, you might actually be able to shave a bit of time off and be able to go on to the next thing, rather than going, oh my God, I can't finish this work because, so this is the thing about understanding what everybody does. That's so important, isn't it?
I've learned over the years, I'm a great believer in empowerment and delegation where possible, and not shrugging shoulders and saying I'll be the first one to get stuck into something. However, I give an example. We look again at the charger thing. So who would I be to approach a suppliers to say, this is the information that we've got on your charger, is this correct? I would just say, this is the format we'd like, and we ask as part of your proposal that you fill this in. You stick to the format, but you can put what you want in it, in the sense that this is what they want to present, and this is the facts that we've asked for in the questions. So it's important that everyone appreciates what they bring to the picture. So because you can't, like you say, if you're, especially SSE for this example again, if you're across business units, it's probably the better example, and you don't appreciate that in transmission. When they're delivering something, it doesn't go into an office, it goes into a store in the middle of nowhere, and then it has to be offset. So maybe when we're dealing with them, they don't order in ones and twos, they order in a pallet. So that's different when I go to the corporate office, because they order in ones and twos, because there's a local drop-off, it goes straight into the office, and that's fine. So it's appreciating those different bits of the picture. Well, actually, what I did in a few instances there was I just assigned someone from each business unit. Right, you tell me your story and how you need it. So all of a sudden we had a contract that was for one thing, but had different flavours. And the supplier knew that, the business unit knew that, and it was much more straightforward eventually.
Because I was going to say, that's you understanding that end to end, isn't it? You're seeing it end to end, from here to here to here to here, and that kind of, like you said, if you say, like, I'm going to use it as a biros. I've got biros. I've got a biro in my hand here.
It was an office supplies contract,
You've
funnily
got
enough.
companies that are ordering. There you go. There you go. So you've got, like you say, corporate offices that want a few packets of biros because, people still need them. But actually you want to, somewhere else that's got hundreds of people, and then, like you say, they want that palette. But it is just those nuances, isn't it, in in people's buying behaviour and their needs. Because that was what I was going to ask you as well. when you look at procurement and sort of if we look at the end user perspective, and if we take it back to going back to the EV charging, kind of example, how do you bring that customer that end user perspective into a procurement decision when when we're looking at EV charging? How does that work? Because that's kind of some of the stuff that you're working on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've been a bit of background's a bit boring, but I think it's 10 years, 10 and a half years. I've had, or sorry, 10 years, just about 10 years, sorry. I've had EVs, and it's the user experience, I would say. So if I rock up, let's say my customer is, I don't know, X council, and they're around the road, and I rock up there and I can charge without a problem with my little bleep card, whatever it is, then I know it's working. So I think from that point, is my card, like we were talking about earlier on about these things about charge and how we can address that issue, if things are working or not. If you can plug in and without fail, it just works and you're charged correctly and all that good stuff, and it unplugs, and that's another key one, it unplugs successfully when you're finished and no one's blocking it and all
Yeah,
these things. If all these things are taken care of, so
yeah.
your whole job, you're looking at marking, signage, bollards, so the environment around it, so it's protected, so it's well signed and signposted. Maybe there's a camera. Wow. Maybe there's a signpost to say there's a fine if you stay too long. For the user, does it work first time every time? Is there instructions? There's a little screen that tells you. Is there somewhere that can actually beep or boop, however you want to call it? Is it contactless pay? Is it an app? Let's try and avoid that. Is it contactless pay? Let's say it's a private one, make it easy. So all those things. And then also, if that's the end user point of view, and then from that charging unit manufacturer, does it fit? Does it actually, the dimensions, is it too wide? Is it too long? Is it too short? Is it going to fit where we say it's going to fit? You don't want to ship something there and go, gosh, there's no
Mm.
space. So don't worry about that bit of paper.
Yeah,
Just
it's
walk
a bit
around the
like
back
buying
of the
a
car.
yeah. Yeah, I was going to say it's a bit like buying my in-laws, bless their hearts,
Mhm.
bought a cooker to fit into a fitted kitchen. Their cooker had died, and they
Mhm.
bought it, but it didn't. It wasn't the width; it was
Mhm.
the depth.
Mhm.
I think it was a cooker. It might have been. Oh no, it wasn't. It was a washing machine. That was it.
Mhm.
So because that cooker would have been very different, but it knows a washing machine, and it's never totally fitted, and it's always done my father-in-law's head in. But it doesn't look any different to
Yeah.
me really. But it's just that tiny bit. So what you're saying there is so right. You need to get the dimensions right, don't you? And
Yeah,
just not
the
leaving that
dimension,
to
and then
the. I've not even thought about that bit.
is it the dimensions, the plug, the connection, the user experience, then before that as well for the installer? Do they know how to install it? Is it a straightforward install? And actually plonking it on the ground, does that work? What groundworks do we need? So you're procuring the services of X, Y, and Z to do the groundworks. Is there if you've got the capacity on site, is the question before that is like, have you got enough power? And then if you don't, by the way, there's a nice little process you have to
Mm,
go through. It's going to take you 2 or 3 years. Hang on. Maybe they actually don't want to. They've got some budget. Is there a way to go off that and maybe look at battery storage capacity or charging only overnight or load balancing? So, and that, and all that sort of stuff. And before that, and then before all that is like, what do you want? And how much have you got to spend? So it kind of goes through that iteration
mm,
of, and procurement involved probably every step of the way because it, I guess an SSE, right charge, right place, right time, all that sort of fun stuff. But it just means, like that thing about it's what you're proposing going to work. If you look at customer requirements and go straight away, it's not going to happen. But what we could suggest is this. So
mm.
rather than just saying no, but actually this is maybe more cost effective or this will work better. But also you can chuck some advertising in there as well. Oh, that's great. So there's lots of things, revenue streams. Maybe in future we'll look at things like, well, I've done one trial already, but vehicle to grid. So is that extra revenue or battery storage to pump the energy back to the grid when it's most required, etc. Lots of fun stuff. So that's kind of why, I suppose, with our personalities, that's just the kind of reason we enjoy it. It's because there's so many bits.
It is. There's so many bits of the jigsaw puzzle,
Yeah.
isn't there? Because I was going to say also the other thing about when you said about advertising, and I know that there are some EV, EV chargers that have got the ability to use advertising, but they're not always used.
Yeah.
Like you'll see like those kind of a double screen, so like the top screen is kind of like the biggest advertising bit, and then the main screen isn't it, as in, it's not, sometimes they don't use the top bit, that's what I'm trying to say. But the other option, which I would love to see from some of the chargers in the UK, across the country, is the ability to provide that level of feedback as well, as in
Yeah.
not just occasionally, not just what they call a net promoter score, which is you get it from your phone company once a year that says, would you like to recommend our services? What would you choose out of 10? That means nothing,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm going to say today it's an 8, next week it's a 3. You need to have feedback on a regular basis to be able to inform your decisions as an organization, because that's what I would love to see as part of I'm assuming part of the procurement process. You could build it in to say, where would we put that feedback? Can we do that? How beneficial is it going to
A-
what benefit
Absolutely.
is it going to provide us with?
Absolutely. I think you're right, because then also you can, with that feedback thing,
So
even the very notion that people will provide, most of the time, it's like with feedback, they'll only provide something if it's negative, but all of a sudden, if people are actually doing it because it's like, oh, that looks quite cool, or gamifying it a little bit, get more involvement, and then actually you might find that people are actually bizarrely, the uptake might be a little bit better, and as it gets busier, this is going to get more and more important when that uptime, or sorry, when that usage time goes from 17% to
yeah,
71%. All of a sudden, you're like, this is critical. So that's kind of, yeah, that's the message that comes across, or we put across a lot as well, is get these things, like you're spot on, let's get these things in place now before it gets really, really busy, before the cars are flooded with EVs, and by that point it's too late.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
And I was going to say, you've got kids, haven't you? I know
Yeah.
you've got they're quite young compared to my son who's now 20. But I remember the days of going to Legoland in Windsor. So
Mm.
those of you who've been to Legoland in Windsor or any of the others, they've got, and I know they're in other places, and I might have talked about this before, but you'll get like, how was your experience today?
Yeah.
And they have this outside the big Legoland store. So usually it's kind of like different smiley faces, different levels of smiley faces, or a bit of a
Mm.
sad face. So and I usually, unless there was something really kind of rubbish,
Mm.
it was, well, actually, you know what, it'd be my son, because he'd just go smiley face every time. But what I remember one time where there was a need to actually put that sad face, and then you get a little bit of, was it this, was it that,
Mm.
because again that helps inform your understanding in your decisions moving forward, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, we went there in October, it was this year. And that
Did you?
yeah, it was good. It was pretty cold, but it was good. It was really good. It was quieter, actually. It was quieter. But yeah, it's like, it's almost like that little element when you're going out to the toilets at the airport is another one. I don't know how many people wash their hands, so I don't tend to do that one. But for those that are in Legoland, for example, um, it kind of makes you feel like maybe they do care a little bit, and maybe that's enough. And if they did the same for charge points, you're right. That's a really good idea. Um, all of a sudden, you'll get buy-in, and uptime, although it has to improve because they'll know where to go. It's like in my old logistics days, the first job I had, the first meaningful job I had, it was assigning technical fix jobs for cash registers in France. Some grumpy French people. It was quite funny. I love the French, but there was some there's people that were close to their retirement, let's say, no matter the nationality, and they were reliant on the people clicking buttons or triggering a fault on the cash machine, and that's how they got the jobs. That's how their jobs were assigned, and all of a sudden that productivity goes up when you know where you're going. So that makes make a big difference.
It makes it does it does make a massive difference, and I just I would love to see that, especially the chargers that have got that ability to do it that aren't currently, because we're missing an opportunity. But just just moving on to another question, really, I suppose. What would you like to see happening in the procurement space, especially kind of in EV charging, in the EV sector, full stop, in the next kind of 5 to 10 years? What would you like to see happen?
I think given the nascent nature, even so dial back a little bit. So when I was in SSC, I did me and an ex-colleague did so what it was, the procurement framework strategy category plan for the group, which was there's about 500 sites for SSE, bizarrely.
Mm.
Most are like things like substations, most are things like wind farms and stuff. So we set out the strategy for the charging, and at the time I remember in our strategy we did say, on one of the lines, this is a very nascent new industry, as we all know, and this was back then, this was about 8 years ago, I think. We need to be 7 or 8 years ago, we need to be mindful of that this is not a well-developed industry. There's going to be buyover, there's going to be people going out of business, there's going to be
Mm.
collaboration and merging and all that sort of stuff. So we need to be mindful that what we say today, what our strategy is today, is going to be different in a year or two or three. And it is, surprise, surprise, the maintenance element is, maybe foreseen as this sort of size when actually it's this sort of size, and everyone complain about faults, which they should. So what I would like, because of that nature, because it's all new and there's a lot of new market entrants, it's still evolving, still developing, there's still so much innovation yet to happen, that public, private, government, everybody, all procurement things, not treat it entirely separately, but treat it a little bit out of the norm. So what I mean by that is, where we have a normal
Mm.
procurement process which is regulated and all that good stuff, is driven by values. So it can be, if it's over a certain threshold, it's got to be regulated, it's got to go through a standstill process and all this sort of good. So lots of delays and bureaucracy, basically. If there's a way we can, like for example this morning it was announced, the government's going to look at a consultation and potentially propose that off-street parking is going to be not going to need planning permission. So in the sense of the charge gully, so if they want a cable, which is going to help my dad, they can go under the pavement in a little gully, hidden, and so that's completely logical. And again, in a reasonably heavily bureaucratic country, an approach like that would help, where we go, actually, you know what, EV procurement's a little bit different. So let's look at appointing 3 small to mediums, 2 maybe medium to large, bigger organisations. But let's make sure we do that, which is a risky approach from the company perspective. But in the grand scheme of things, if I think about big corporate, is it really? The worst case is one of those falters and you've got someone else in the background that can pick it up. That's fine. So it's a slightly different approach, I think, is needed to working with and contracting and buying from the AV industry. Again, you'll also get new market entrants in terms of supply of the goods, the software, etc., from the Far East. We've seen that with the cars, and we'll see that increasingly more so with Eastern European and Chinese manufacturers coming in. But they often, and the batteries as well, often they probably know better than we do. So yeah, we need to be very open to
Yeah.
being flexible.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to ask you this then. So, how can you help companies then get through that mire, as it were, and get them to a place where, in future we can kind of see all of these good things coming out? I know what your USP is, your unique selling point, as it were, but But who can you help with all of this stuff that we've been talking about?
I think probably, yeah, how could I help would be the approach to the EV market. Given my background's 10 plus years in and around on EV, driving EV, being involved in EV and energy, the procurement logistics, and then the bids and tenders stuff with the startup. The reason for that end-to-end view and the value of that is that you can appreciate when it's very difficult. You say everyone's very busy. So if I give you an example of a local company looking at something, it actually wasn't just EVs, it was the EV potentially, but also the energy usage. So it's like they don't have time to run a business, an ice cream shop, full enough, quite a decent sized roof. Have you looked at solar? And all of a sudden, quite a manufacturing ice cream there, and don't have time to do that. Can you bring those costs down in your energy? So all of a sudden, you can employ more staff, which you need, and then longer term, you're on the best tariff. So it's looking at maybe a different approach to who are we contracting with, how are we contracting with them, can we fix prices? There's no, I think, bringing in a corporate or staying with a small to medium business or company mentality, which is very, very easy to do, and I'm sure I do it myself for my own company, is very difficult to be blinded by the business, whereas the opportunity for someone like myself to come in and go, day 1, day 3, day 5, have you looked at this? Let's look at that, and having the time and the expertise to just make a difference and say there's a different way of doing things. If you're procuring from X, Y, and Z suppliers, did you know there's margin in there? Did you know you're actually losing out here? And if you do it this way, there's a saving. And then in terms of bidding, when you are bidding for this stuff, before we even get there, you're going to need to jump through these hoops first. So being prepared in terms of your cost base and being able to have that kind of, I suppose, in a funny sort of way, corporate outlook. You might not be a corporate large organization, but you probably deserve to be able to have that bargaining power, and you probably could have that, make that difference in future, to ask those questions, those difficult questions about why couldn't you fix the price? Why couldn't you agree terms with them? Why can't they be more favourable? Because all of a sudden they have an agile player that allows them an entrance into other customers that they might not have otherwise had. And there's a collaboration thing. So it's a different way of viewing supply chain and bidding, essentially.
And I was going to say, what you've just said there about being agile and not being that. Do you remember the oil tank? Was it an oil tanker? Or it was a big No, it was a big container ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal. Not being that, whereas a smaller company can be agile and can make decisions a lot quicker. It's what you're really saying, what you're describing, and it's the same with kind of improvement work, that actually that external lens coming in, you can look at things on that end-to-end basis, can't you, from one end to the other, and spot these things that people who are so involved in that organization, sometimes it's in front of their faces, but they can't always see it, can they?
Exactly.
Sometimes it has to be somebody else who points it out.
No, exactly. And it's like it's that approach to be able to, from prior experience, to look at it and it's like, and you're right, you probably have seen it. It's just having the time and the sort of the experience to look at it quite quickly and say, this isn't a perfect solution, but this will make a difference in your day to day. I'm like just as much like yourself. Probably the improvement thing. I love is if there's anything that can be in any way, shape, or form simplified or automated. I'm absolutely all for it, because at the end of the day, bids, and we're working towards that, they all ask for the same stuff. So if you can build in the background a Did It Vote, a library of stuff, answers questions, likelihood, certifications. So one of the first things we did was, even before you look at any of those bids, you need to have all this, you need to be registered here, and you need to do tick those boxes. All right, okay. And some of them was quite an eye opener, like quality certificate. Do you need that? Yeah, you do. And they were aware of it, but didn't realise the urgency was that we can't even go to begin to look at this stuff if you don't have these things. Insurance is an interesting one as well. You have to have certain levels that nobody needs the levels they ask for, but it would help if you say, yeah, we can do that. So
it's that knowledge for you. It's that background knowledge, isn't it? It's filling those, because filling those gaps. Even if you've got like a small business with like 10, 20, 30, 40 people, doesn't necessarily mean that they've got all of that insider knowledge. And what you're talking about is filling those gaps in. It's a bit like I was going to say retail in a bathroom.
yeah,
I like to use my anecdotal evidence.
Oh, you have to.
But or just filling a crack in a wall or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You are kind of you're the polyfiller.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I like that. I'll keep that one for later. I like that one. No, you're right. It's
I thought you'd like that.
again, probably going back in my career, is like what the first job in procurement I had was at outsourcing. So basically, it's a company exchanging, and the principle was pretty good. So looking at going to big companies and saying, see that stuff you don't want to buy, you buy phones, you buy computers and your stuff, but see the stuff you don't want to do, your core service is this stuff. See that non-core stuff, we'll take care of that. And it seems like low value add, but all of a sudden you've freed up 5-10% of your workforce, 20-30% of their time, and that time comes at a cost. So when they've got that free time, the cost is so insignificant, so they maybe say, I don't know, 20,000 cost, but savings in terms of their time and what they can then add in value into their own organisation, maybe 100,000, it pays for itself 2-3-fold easy. So it's and that's from a savings point of view or a success of bids won. It's both elements are important, of course. Revenue generation, and before you even get there, being able to offer that at a better price and increasing the chances of winning. So I like that polyfill.
And just having somebody like you, good, and having somebody like you around to be able to fill those gaps and have that knowledge is fantastic. And sometimes, like I say, on my side, on the yours is improvement, yours is the stuff that you look at in procurement. Mine is kind of a lot of the end-to-end stuff in just slightly different way, but you can see these things quite differently, and it's making them feel tangible to people, isn't it? If you can provide that kind of level of tangibility, is that word? Probably is. If not, I've just made it. No, it is. Actually being able to make something tangible so that they can see that saving. Because some of the stuff that I work in, people can't always see that saving. But same as what you're saying, I've kind of said, well, there's certain things where if you think about it, somebody can save a couple of hours a week, one person, on doing something slightly different. And, it doesn't need to be majorly different, but just maybe, a step that you're doing in that process, you take one bit out and it, actually that minutes per day, it could be 15 minutes a day or whatever. But what if you say, like, overall, whatever you're doing saves 2 hours a week, look at that over a month, over a year. You're freeing time up, and it's not trying to get people to go, oh well, somebody's going to make me do something else now. It's not that. It means that you're freeing up time so that you're not having to work like a Trojan all the time to, just work like a normal person. I don't know what normal is. Do you know what I mean? But work like somebody who doesn't feel that they have to do kind of extra hours all the time to fit all of the work that they've got to do in that day. So freeing a few hours, a couple of hours a week, it makes a difference, especially if you can do that over a number of different people.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
think like you're saying, it's about thinking about things a little bit differently, isn't it?
Yeah, It's like, if the machine's broken, fix the machine. So if there's a better way of that machine working for you, or if it's a better way of the process working for you, that's your expertise, you're right, is all of a sudden you're not stretched and just making it. You're with bids as well, you're completing the bid a few days beforehand, and you've got time to reflect and to assess and set yourself up for more success rather than just managing. You're absolutely right.
I'm going to ask you one final question.
Go for it.
My final question to you then is, outside of procurement, what excites you about the EV sector and the sustainability transition, electrification transition right now? What excites you?
What excites me about the EV sector outside of Procure EV is, it's so cheesy, but making a difference, and making a difference in the sense my wife's got asthma, and see not having stinking diesel everywhere coming off a bus where it's still okay in 2025 where kids are queuing up and there's black smog. It's not even the issue, but it's like, that's really bad, especially winter when it's cold. So a journey to school that doesn't have to involve a car, doesn't even need to be an EV, can be feet. People can walk within a 2 mile radius. I think maybe I'm a bit really old school sort of regime like, in the sense of, I think within a certain, unless there's a medical condition, I think within a certain radius of schools or whatever it might be, people should walk first and foremost, but then improving air quality. Remember in COVID, if I go back, when people were travelling less, that all of a sudden basically nature was almost reborn, in a sense, that flowers were going crazy and there was all sorts of stuff. I remember very clearly that air quality was so good. It'd never been that good for many years. You kind of wonder if it's that planned. But going back to your point, is that excites me, improving air quality. I mean, I just love cars, to be honest. It's fun. People deserve to. It's almost moving to that bit about. There's a really good car a few years ago, Sonos Scion, which was it's a shame I invested a very small amount of money, £50 in a share. They went bust. See nothing. But the point was that their car was covered in solar panels, and it was set up. The purpose was it was set up as an app sharing community car. There's a battery electric car with solar panels that could sit there in the community, and an ex-colleague and I from Volta who lives around the corner were very keen on that idea about, nobody needs a car sitting there 17, 18, 19 hours on the driveway. So if there's a better way, so car sharing, stuff like that. So car sharing, reducing emissions, increase of EVs, but I still think there's a space and a place, and I hope this goes down well, and I mean it in a good way, that if we're going to crush all old cars and get rid of them entirely, I think that's the wrong thing. So actually sweating the asset, maintaining them, and having those cars that are petrol or whatever they might be for enjoyment on occasion, rather than the ATB. So the ATB for me is where electricity comes in for cars and vehicles. The ATB journeys being by foot, bike, whatever, train, or electrified. So that's the bit I look forward to most, reducing emissions, electrifying everything, and as much as we can consume of what comes from that big yellow blob in the sky and use ourselves, all the better.
Love it. I love that. That's a really good end. I really like that.
Cheers,
honestly.
Thank you.
It's me and you could just talk. And when you were talking about Belinda, for those of you that didn't listen to Belinda Guy's podcast, that's who he was on about.
Yep.
But me, you, and Belinda, I've said, if we got in a room together, we'd just be talking for like ages. But so if you haven't listened to Belinda Guy's podcast with me, then please check it out. But just on that note, it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Both do go off on like I said to Belinda, the spicy tangents. But that's fine. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about conversation. And we've had that. And it's just been lovely. So just say thank you. Thank you ever so much for joining me. Honestly, it's been great.
Absolute pleasure. I guess I could be here for another 4 hours. It's absolutely fine.
I know.
I appreciate it.
I'm gonna have to have some water in a minute though. 'Cause I'm a bit
I know.
But listen, But look, thank you.
No problem.
And to everybody watching and listening, I'm just going to say, check him out. Check out Procure EV. I will share your links in the show notes. Check him out. There's lots of knowledge in that wee head that he has over there, or up
Thanks,
north.
Scott.
But yeah. But look, Leon, thank you for joining me. And to everybody else, I'm just going to say, please do, share, like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. Check out our podcast page on LinkedIn and just get the word out. And if you need help with procurement, please just give him a shout. He's a good lad. Anyway, for everybody watching and listening, I'm going to say thanks, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Procure EV, who are supporting organisations across EV charging and electrification by bringing clarity and confidence to procurement bids and tenders. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe and explore our other conversations on sustainability, innovation and doing things differently. And if you know someone who would be a great guest or who would be interested in sponsoring a future episode, you can reach me at liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for tuning in, because real change starts with the conversations we choose to have.